speak to? Well, I think we have got a good act to follow. We're now going to meet the Chief Executive of Aer Lingus, Christoph Mueller. So, Christoph, if you'd like to join me on the stage. We have an Irish theme for the next 15 minutes. We're going to get to Christoph first and his perspective on Aer Lingus, followed by Ken O'Toole from Ryanair. Well, Christoph, I was talking to you earlier on this morning, and I would say you could describe yourself as maybe a man of the world, a man of the aviation world. You've been around the track. You were telling me you've been at Aer Lingus now 2 years. Do you regret that you took the decision to go there, given all the things that are on your plate at the present time?
No, certainly not. We are making good progress, and there was a lot of debate about the different models, legacy, low cost. We describe ourselves as profitable, and I believe that is the best place to be. Okay.
Well, we heard in the last session about everybody's respective elephants in the room. Can we just tackle yours? I would say you have a couple.
We have quite a few.
Let's look at two specific ones. We have talk, although I'm not certain that it's been confirmed, the Irish government may, as part of its debt reduction programme, look to sell its remaining stake in Aer Lingus. Then you have the stake of your largest shareholder, perhaps a parallel issue which EasyJet's dealing with, which is Ryanair. Would the Irish government be better off just to sell that stake, let Ryanair have the way which Michael O'Leary has long wanted, and just buy you up lock, stock and barrel?
Well, just to recall, the Irish government privatized Aer Lingus in 2006, and I believe it has always been the intention to absolutely spin it off entirely. There were two rationales, in fact, preventing the government of stepping out entirely and retaining the 25%, one of which was to protect Aer Lingus from a hostile takeover from Ryanair. Everybody knows there were two attempts. The OFT and the legislation in Brussels will certainly prohibit that in the future, so that reason is gone. Secondly, of course, it's understandable that a nation living on an island perceives air traffic like a highway, like a motorway, and there, I believe, is a good reasons to be made that the connectivity, particularly between the UK, where just in London are more Irish people than in the Republic, that this highway is maintained. So there were some reservations with regard to the slot utilization. Also, that is now resolved, and the minister said last week there is no strategic rationale to maintain the 25%, and the government decided to sell it once the last obstacles are removed.
Okay, I mean, but let's put cards on the table. I mean, Michael O'Leary has had this long-cherished ambition. They've issued some more moderate statements recently. They've been thwarted by regulatory aspects in terms of getting a majority shareholding. But if it is not to fall into the hands of Ryanair, who else might be interested? Because we have one of your predecessors, William Walsh, seemingly in the press in the last few days saying he's not interested because of a big pension deficit. We have Air France KLM being slammed by the financial analysts over high costs and a whole host of business issues. And we have a new CEO in Lufthansa coming in saying now's the time to consolidate and focus on organic growth. Those would have seemed to me to perhaps be the alternative grouping. So would another airline be interested?
That I think is a conclusion which is not going too far. Number one, I mean, a listed company is for sale every day. That's the nature of the game, and people need to understand that our shares are traded in London and in Dublin every day. So who is ultimately owning the company is a question of price. We recently announced that we are not going to join one of the three alliances. And that's the reason why to focus just on the three leading legacy carriers in Europe as a potential buyer is not correct or not the right conclusion. People have not understood our business model. We are connecting Ireland with the world. We are, in mobile phone terms, if you wish, the only roaming partner available to get to and from the island. And so we have to be open to the entire industry. We have co-chair and interline agreements across the alliance world with legacy carriers, with JetBlue, with all different kinds of business model. We don't make it a religion. We want to make money, and that a majority shareholder will understand. If a majority shareholder steps in and prevents us on doing our business, connecting 70 million Irish people living all over the world with the Republic, then it's just a bad call.
But are you saying, though, that against that, perhaps given logic of those three big groups, if it's not Ryanair and it's not one of those three, are you saying that one of these other diverse partners we shouldn't rule out having a financial interest in the company?
Well, of course, I mean, it's a good deal. I have to reiterate that we made a margin of 5%, which is in the upper 10% in the global aviation industry. Our second quarter was delivering 7.4% margin. I believe it's just a good value proposition, and Thomas said earlier, Lufthansa is floated. I think the largest shareholder in Lufthansa, I haven't checked it, I hope I don't say it's the wrong thing, is certainly not larger than 3%. That's the nature of a listed company, and we are all focused now on the elephants in the room. Is it a good value proposition for the remaining shareholder? I believe a full free float is the best way to go.
And what about the day-to-day relationship with Ryanair as a shareholder? We see the very public statements, I think again in the last week.
It's a true love affair.
I can imagine it is.
Yeah.
I see Michael Leary is believing you're very much in a position to hand out a healthy dividend to shareholders at the moment, for example.
In all honesty, the shareholding of Ryanair, I believe, is a sexier subject in the press, but as a matter of fact, Ryanair is our strongest competitor. We have a route overlap of 85%. So on 85% of all routes, Ryanair is my main competitor. That keeps me on the toes. That's good for us. It keeps the cost low and the people awake at night. And in that respect, the shareholding of Ryanair, for me, is almost an historical issue now.
Okay. Coming back to that time, as I mentioned, when you joined Aer Lingus 2 years ago, and if we think back several more years than that, Aer Lingus could have been seen as perhaps a dinosaur, a basket case that wasn't going to be around. Then it went through the radical changes brought in by Willie Walsh to turn it into practically a pseudo low-cost carrier, taking as many elements of a mantra as it could at that time. And I think you weren't here yesterday, but we had Alex Cruz, who's just on the panel, did credit Aer Lingus as being one of the few legacy airlines that had managed to turn around and reshape itself into a low-cost model. You've come in and seemingly on the face of it are taking the company in a different direction. Does that mean you're trying to put, again, we had a lot of discussion just now about complexity, are you trying to put complexity back in, put it back on the high-end curtains, caviar, business class approach?
No, not necessarily. I mean, absolutely right. It was a shock therapy back in 2001, 2002. Aer Lingus truly became a low-cost carrier and still is. Just to remind, we lowered our cost base over the last 18 months by another 10%. Unit cost is even declining more rapidly. We will at the end of next year reach the unit cost level of EasyJet, and I have to admit it's a little bit flawed because we have a couple of long-haul aircraft distorting a little bit the denominator, but nevertheless I think it's a good achievement for a 75-year-old grandma. What was wrong was the revenue side. The cost side is not is very competitive. Nothing is really entirely wrong, but the fees in Dublin Airport. The revenue side, in fact, I think we followed a little bit too much the Me Too. The customer in Ireland had no choice. They had Ryanair and Aer Lingus, and both were crappy service. So people want more, and we leave it to their distinction to pick from a menu of a modular product build-up. And let me try to explain in what environment we are operating. We have a shuttle between Dublin and Heathrow on an hourly basis almost. These flights are, I would say, 80–85% business related, time sensitive travelers. If you take that flight in the morning, you see attaché cases, people want to leave left alone, maybe a cup of coffee, a newspaper, but most important, they want a fast track security, they want lounge access, and they want, surprisingly, miles and more, or frequent flyer or loyalty points. You can buy all that. The same aircraft returns to Dublin and flies to Malaga. Not a single business person on board, but families of 5. And what they want is spaghetti bolognese to keep the kids quiet. So you have to, with the same metal, with the same cabin crew, with the same galley layout, you have within 3 hours to offer 2 entirely different products. And for us to figure out what the customer wants is one way you might go. We just leave the choice to the customer. Our internet booking engine has such a functionality that you can really build your product in a modular way. And also to remind you that this one and the same person might be a business traveler from Monday to Friday and have a 180 degrees different demand from Saturday to Sunday.
But it isn't the core issue.
And that's the reason why we restored our revenue base, and what we are now combining, and that is most probably next to JetBlue unique in the world, a full-fledged product, if you would wish, long haul, we connect and all that stuff, without the complexity.
Isn't the core issue that the Irish market is a very, if not ultra, price-focused market? We have a dispersed Irish population around the world, a lot in the UK. Ryanair demonstrated as they grew their business model that people who were going on ferries between the UK and Ireland would fly, and people couldn't believe they could get these low fares. You've had to match those. You have had to lower your costs, but coming from a legacy background, have you done enough now in cost reduction to actually be able to sustain that in your ideal world in an independent way?
It's airline business, and cost is a little bit like jogging. You have to do it every day, otherwise you get fat. And that's the reason why it will never end. We can never say we are sufficiently productive on our cost base. Technology will help us, and so on and so forth. But let's remind ourselves, similar to Bertolt talking about Latvia, the Irish travel market lost 30% volume in the last 3 years. Have you ever seen that? I've never ever seen that before. And despite of that market decline, we cut capacity by 10%, but we are up for 11% growth this year. And so we abandoned market stimulation, even though the Irish market is absolutely tuned to it, because it's most probably the most price-sensitive market in Europe. We just leave the customer the choice, and it's working quite well. We are demand-led in every differentiation of our product, be it just the transportation fee or the added value products we offer.
But underpinning the need to cut cost and to meet this price-sensitive market, you've had to go through a great deal of pain in terms of staff and workforce. Yes. What I was wondering, especially in the last year, you've had certainly cabin crew disputes, possibly, if I remember rightly, pilot disputes. We're seeing these kind of things coming out of legacy carriers. We've seen the same battle with British Airways and cabin crew. Is that going to come back to haunt you again and again? Does the workforce understand? Again, if I look at your competitor side by side, of course, Michael O'Leary wouldn't entertain having unions in Ryanair and has maybe a hire and fire outlook.
Yeah.
Can you survive by constantly going into battle with your own unions?
I believe it is a step change. I mean, let's not try to simplify. Our employees, at least a vast majority, joined Aer Lingus, let's say maybe 10 or 15 years ago, in the strong belief this is a fully owned government entity with all the perks of a civil servant environment. They worked cockpit and cabin around 450, 500 hours. We ratcheted that up last year to 850. What do you expect? I mean, if you wish, the contract which was signed 15 years ago is not valid. We changed it unilaterally, and that resulted in some unhappiness. We negotiated our way through, and I have to stress that the support we received from all our employees, particularly in the presence of the Irish overall economic crisis, is overwhelming. So I wouldn't exaggerate that. It's human. We cope with it. We resolved it, and it's done. Will it happen in the future? I don't know, but I believe we are about to embark on a renewed industrial relation quality. And I'm quite convinced the vast majority of our employees have understood that only a profitable airline is safe against a hostile takeover, and our employees since last year participate in a gain-sharing program with every cent we make.
And again, the backdrop of the Irish economy overall, which, as you were saying, is extremely weak, a lot of questions, a lot of Irish indeed emigrating, 21st century emigration, as we've seen in previous centuries. We heard again in a previous session about pan-European airlines, Ryanair being truly pan-European, EasyJet, others who are not. And again, when I think again about the question of a buyer, the Irish market is vast, especially to the UK, but globally in parts of the world, such as the US, of course, where you're strong. But you can't be a global player. You have home market weakness. Again, what are you doing in terms of strategy and policy to try to overcome this? Do you have a high dependence on the Irish market itself for your core revenues, or do you generate revenues elsewhere?
When I joined, the proportion was 45% sales abroad, outside the Republic, and of course then 55 in the Republic. We turned that around in 1.5 years. Currently we have 55% abroad. No, we tricked a little bit because our dependence from the Irish market correctly is very high. It's too high. In fact, I come to the growth aspect later. What we have done is we switched on connectivity. We have never done that before, and that works quite well because our low cost position also provides us with the opportunity to price a Düsseldorf, Boston, a Lyon, Chicago absolutely competitive. To our big surprise, we are most competitive in markets with non-stop offerings to those destinations in the US. And that once more underpins that particularly our long-haul product is extremely competitive, and it's a big success. It's as profitable from the margin as our short-haul product.
And part of that process of feeding the long haul, we had Paul Schutz on one of the panels yesterday from Air, now working closely with you. I think if I remember rightly, he said about 80% of Air's business is now the Aer Lingus regional. Can you just tell us a bit about the Aer Lingus perspective on that? You've used another airline to do something for you that seemingly you couldn't do for yourselves.
No, I believe the Irish market was really one fits it all. If you just have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So people were flying to the UK with big equipment, 737 NGs and 320s. And as a consequence of that, we had many markets in the UK, traditionally very strong with Ireland, served only once a day, which is not a value proposition for the business traveler. So we reduced the gauge size. We operate with ATR 3 times a day instead of once. And business customers are just rushing through the door. The product is very good, so I believe it is a perfect pathfinder concept, has been developed before, it's not our invention. Works very, very well, and is the main source of our growth this year. And
is it something as well, I mean, it all sounds very positive, growth and partnership, but is it profitable? Does it make business sense? Yes. And is it secure for the future? Air themselves have gone through financial examinership in Irish law terms, effectively bankrupt, coming back out of it. Yeah. Are you confident they're going to remain there as a partner for you and that they're going to get something out of this as well as Aer Lingus?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a win-win situation, clearly. As you pointed out, I do not have visibility on their financial statements, but if Paul said yesterday that he's making 80% of his profits with us,
well, he didn't say profit, but 80% of his business.
Glad to hear that, but I believe that's true. Our sales machine is much stronger, our brand is much stronger. It's always a very fine line, and most probably other legacy carriers in Europe had the same. If you really want to own it, you buy it. The day after, the ATR pilot dreams about the captainship on the 320, and the whole thing goes down the drain from a cost position. If you don't own them, they might walk away. So you have to find a commercial agreement which clearly puts the incentive right. We found and it's not a cost plus or something, it's a pure franchise agreement which keeps the Air people also interested in the revenue side of the house, and that's, I believe, the recipe to success.
Well, we talked as well about the pan-European aspects. One thing you do which seems to be atypical in Europe, you have this ad hoc or oddball flight between Madrid and Washington, which I believe you operate.
Oh, it's not ad hoc, it's every day.
Right, but I mean, it's a one-off type service. Tell us about that, because we had the fanfare of open skies between the US and Europe coming in, a couple or so years ago, and not much happened. We've seen 1 or 2 airlines trying to do things outside of their home country. How is it that an Irish airline is operating with an American carrier out of Spain? And again, does it make financial sense?
No, the story is quite simple. I spent a huge amount of time in the last 15 years helping to negotiate open skies. We have it now since a couple of years between Europe and the United States, and believe it or not, nobody uses it after years of discussion. In fact, we saw that niche, and we were sitting down with United and say, why don't we combine our low production base, or the cost base, with your strong revenue penetration in the US market? Washington DC is a hub for United, but they've never operated to Spain because they didn't have the right equipment. 330-200 is our equipment of choice. So it's very simple. We combine our cost position with their revenue position, and we are profitable since month number 2. It's never been seen on the North Atlantic. Our crew is based in Washington DC on local contracts, so US contracts. So if not pan-European, then at least we have this specialty. It's looking quite well. Might be a new model. Only obstacle we see are the collective bargaining agreements in the United States. United with their pilots, or United Continental with their pilots, see some difficulties, but it's profitable. To cancel it is a very tough call.
Is it something you could roll out beyond this, or would that union issue again prohibit it?
I mean, the discussion is, and I can certainly quote all CEOs from the big legacy carriers in Europe. They have all stated in the last 12 months, once or twice, that their short-haul business is not profitable, that they have to find a solution. The whole thing with feed into the hubs is in tatters from a profitability point of view. Yes, why not? Why don't we think about maybe not under the brand Aer Lingus, offering our uplift services at a very attractive cost basis to other carriers.
Okay. Again, alliances, you mentioned briefly already. Aer Lingus was in One World. I can't remember, it'd come out of that before your time. I think it was before your time. You've been reflecting again recently about whether you should go back into an alliance. We've heard a lot of debate earlier about complexity. I sometimes wonder, do consumers really know what alliances are, other than the frequent flyer points? And do airlines really get the best out of them in terms of really working together as a group in terms of cost negotiations, whether it's with airports, manufacturers and so on? Where is Aer Lingus at the moment about this alliance issue?
I was happy enough to be part of the Star Alliance founding member in '97, and seamless travel, you will all remember, we needed even to explain to the customer what codeshare was. Everybody was a little bit suspicious. Technology has overcome all these hurdles today with an interline agreement, and through check-in you can deliver the same value to the customer without an alliance membership. Secondly, an alliance membership does not come for free. It's very expensive, and if Aer Lingus hypothetically would join the Star Alliance, I'll pick that as an example because it's the largest one, just to negotiate reciprocity in codeshare and frequent flyer programs with 26 carriers of the world, I would have to employ 100 people to do that. I don't have them and I won't join. Reason number 3, which is most probably the most important one, our business traveler share is 15% of our overall traffic. So I throw a lot of money after a very small population of my customer base, as opposed to, let's say, a carrier like Lufthansa or Swiss with 40 to 50%. So it's simply not delivering for me at the current, let's say, price list. I see some movement in all 3 alliances in maybe diminishing the bureaucracy, because that has mushroomed. They have all big organizations with big head offices, all very expensive looking stuff. It's not our game. It's not our game. We have to stay modest. Low cost is our dogma. How we present our product is a different thing. We are not perceived as a low cost carrier. Our customers tell us 80+% that they don't see us as a low cost carrier, and we have to just follow that.
Okay, let's go to the floor, Christoph, and see if somebody from the audience would like to ask you a question. If somebody could just put their hand up, do they have a question? Me down the back. Well, I'll ask you another one in that case, Christoph. Just looking at the wider challenging issues, I mean, we haven't talked about fuel price in this session. I mean, that's affecting everybody. I don't know where Aer Lingus is in terms of its hedging position. Do you see fuel prices as something you're going to be able to manage for the long term? Do you assume we're going to see up and down in price, or are we going to have to accept longer term higher prices?
Normally you see a very strong correlation between the fuel price and the global economy, and you see the more careful predictions for the United States immediately showed an effect on the fuel price. Difficult to say. If I would know, I would be a rich man. No, I believe the biggest challenge I see going forward is certainly the overall macroeconomic climate in Europe, particularly in Ireland and the UK. Discretionary spend for vacation is on decline, and we don't see the seabed yet, particularly here in the UK. So I believe careful capacity management is paramount for the industry. Over and above that, we just have to manage it. We managed a decline of 30% in our market, 10% our own capacity. We did it in a profitable way. It cannot go on forever. There is absolutely no doubt. You cannot shrink yourself out of the misery. But I hope that at least we have reached a sustainable demand level in Ireland, and I hope that for the rest of Europe it at least is a small growth signal.
Okay, and in terms of fuel specifically, I mean, are you in the market for new generation aircraft at this point?
Not yet. Our fleet is only 5.8 years old, so we have relatively new equipment, and our order book projects that even the average age will come down in the foreseeable future. But nevertheless, we have to look into new technology. We are interested in that. And with regard to fuel on our long-haul services, we can charge a fuel surcharge, but again, that cannot go on forever. So we believe that with our very systematic rolling fuel hedging system, we cannot protect ourselves against high fuel prices in the long run. But what we can do is we can ask the question, are all customers prepared next summer to pay this premium for the fuel surcharge? If we answer that question with no, we step on the brakes with regard to capacity. That's the only thing we can do in that respect.
Okay, and again, the point you made, a very important one, I think, about the state of the European economies, and particularly those that you're most exposed to, UK and Ireland. Do you have any kind of doomsday scenario where you've calculated what you would do if there was further fall in economic activity than what we've seen already, or indeed going beyond that to the US, which is also pretty fragile and an important market for you?
Yeah, the interesting lesson learned, and there are not that many examples of, let's say, a default of one or the other economy. The shock effect is very deep, but very short, in fact. The recuperation kicks in after 6 to 9 months. So that is most probably something we have to look into, and we are currently doing that. I do not expect drastic things, but it's about to survive a short trough, a significant but short trough in demand. But again, I think Ireland is on the right path currently.
Okay. One more chance for a question to Christoph.
Please, in the back.
Somebody over here.
To the right, in the back.
Yeah, hi, I'm over here, I think we've got a couple. Yeah, it's Neil Pakey from Vancouver Airport Services. It's just something Carolyn alluded to earlier on that we've not picked up on, which is the different tax regimes across Europe. And I'm interested to know if the different tax regimes has affected at all your route decisions, whether you've not gone into a market because of excessive government tax, or you have because there isn't. And obviously the Irish have got a particular case because they've reduced theirs but still have one.
Yeah, I think there were a few governments experimenting with that. I always like to take the Dutch government as an example, because they learned it very, very quick that an additional APD is detrimental to demand. They scrapped it after they saw traffic is going to Liège, to Wees, to all other airports, the closest airports to the Dutch border. The German government seems to be more stubborn in just ignoring facts of life. The Irish government is somewhere in between. We came down from 10 to 3 and still some arm twisting going on. We have to live, obviously, for the time being with the €3, not appreciated, in fact, because if every carrier in the world would make €3 in profit, we would be a fantastic, profitable industry. But that's all I can say. With a little bit disbelief, I see the plans of the UK government to increase it further. That is basically in conjunction with no further runway here around London. Willie called it laughable. I would support that statement. In addition to that, we have the ETS coming in next year, or planned to come in. What is the Aer Lingus public point of view on that? Obviously not in favour. We fought that for many years in Brussels. We have never been for it because we always argued that the fuel saving as such is incentive enough for an airline to be very careful in burning fuel. Now we have it. I'm observing with a lot of interest what the Chinese and the US carriers are doing in that respect. I believe we are just starting the next round on that debate. Okay. Any more questions from the room? Yeah, the gentleman over here. I think it's Rigas Taganis. I'll have to shout. No, Mike's just coming your way now.
My name is Rigas Taganis. I think, Christoph, you're in a unique position as an airline in having had to face low-cost competition through Ryanair head-on, and you've adapted in many ways to that competition. So my question, I have two questions. How successful have you been in facing up to Ryanair? And secondly, given that other traditional airlines in Europe are facing increasing competition from low-cost carriers, what would you advise them to do?
Yeah, well, I think the first question I answered, we left the choice at which fare the customer wants to travel to the customer. You can have the seat only, and our pricing point is equal or very similar to Ryanair. We have, in quoting Thomas, one advantage: we are not flying into the forest, we are flying to places known as Charles de Gaulle or Frankfurt Main and so on and so forth. Just that, I believe, our customer perceive as absolutely good value for money. So if we are €10 higher than Ryanair, it's a lot. In most cases, we are equal, and then we play a little bit with pricing and yield management, which of course is a little bit our secret. What I would advise the other carriers in Europe: nothing. It's not. I'm not paid for that. No, I quoted my second quarter, which is not a strongest quarter, had already a margin of 7.4% this year. We had an overall full fiscal year margin of 5% last year. If you benchmark that with the global airline industry, we are in the top 10% of profitability. Christoph, I think we're going to have to draw it to a close there, so we very much appreciate you coming along today. We wish you good luck with your upcoming challenges, and we will hope to invite you back next year to see who your shareholders are at that point. Christoph Mueller, thank you very much. Thank you.